The Honourable Marianne Street.
Very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the call, and I want to pick up where my colleague Grant Robertson left off. I want to focus on Clause 6 in Part 2, and under Part 2, of course, this is called the substantive provisions. And that's for real. That is true. These are, in fact, the substantive provisions of this bill in Part 2. Grant Robertson drew people's attention to 6.2, Clause 6, subsection 2, which details, as he said, that the regulatory concessions prevail if a regulatory concession is inconsistent with any provision of the gambling law. So the regulatory concessions which we are passing into law, if this bill goes ahead, become law, and they supersede the gambling law. But just in case the government hasn't quite skewed it enough in favour of Sky City, it backs it up with subsection 3, which says, despite subsection 2, the one to which I've just referred, the provision of the gambling law prevails if its application would be more favourable in relation to Sky City Casino than the regulatory concessions. So if we've got it wrong and we haven't put enough in there in regulatory concessions that supersede gambling law and that work in the favour of Sky City, don't worry, we'll make the law apply if it is more favourable. So talk about belts and braces for Sky City. Who wouldn't want to go into a deal with this government if you can walk out with a deal of that sort? This is just extraordinary. The law doesn't prevail unless it is better, in which case it does. So every which way, the Sky City wins. And that has got to be one of the most pernicious things I've ever seen in legislation that this government has put up, and there's been some bad ones. But I want also to talk about Clause 7, Mr. Chairman, because this is talking about Clause 7.3 of the agreement, which has the force of law. And I just want to draw that to members' attention, because this says that Clause 7.3 of the agreement, as set out in Schedule 3, has the force of law to the extent necessary to give effect to the regulatory concessions and to the agreement. So here we are tonight in the committee stages of addressing a piece of legislation that will become law when which will encapsulate an agreement and put it into law if and when it is passed. And that piece out of the agreement, Clause 7.3, I want to spell out for members of the public. I know that others have talked about the numbers of machines and the numbers of gambling tables and so on, but I just want to labour this point again. Here is the agreement. Here are the nuts and bolts of the agreement that Sky City has procured with this government. First of all, it says, notwithstanding anything in Condition 5, well, we haven't quite got Condition 5 because we're only talking about Section 7, it says that the licence holder may install and operate in the gambling area, in addition to the gaming machines already specified, up to 230 additional single-terminal gambling machines. Another 230. And then it goes on to say the licence holder may install and operate up to 40 additional gaming tables. So 40 more gaming tables on top of what they already have, 230 additional single-terminal machines on top of what they already have, and then, in addition to the gaming machines already talked about, the licence holder may install and operate up to 240 additional automated table game terminals. So here's another 240, or up to 12 further gaming tables if each one is substituted for 20, Mr. Chairman, of the automated, thank you, Mr. Chairman, of the automated table game terminals. So it goes on to say that at no time shall the number of single terminal gaming machines in the gambling area exceed 1,877. This number is truly astonishing. The size of this is truly astonishing. And I want to emphasise the size of this, Mr. Chairman, because of the fact that the government has taken out any requirement to measure gambling harm. That in fact the harm minimisation provisions are abandoned, that there was not allowed to be any representation to the Select Committee debating this from the Ministry of Health or anybody else who might have talked about gambling harm. And I want to just punctuate that comment with a little story from a woman whom I admire greatly in Nelson. And we'll call her Irene. Irene has twice in my hearing spoken up as a problem gambler, as she has advertised a toolkit for problem gamblers put out by the Problem Gambling Foundation. I have been to launches of that toolkit at which she has spoken, and she has spoken honestly, heartrendingly about the harm that gambling did to her and her family and her home, as she squandered every mortgage payment, every pay packet, and everything that came into that house on a hopeless, futile, but addictive behaviour. She is a hero, and she has stood up and been heard by the people in Nelson who campaigned to get pokie machines taken out of one pub. Pokie machines taken out of one pub. Contradicted the council, who said, no, we're okay, we've got the sinking lid thing. And they said, well, we don't want the pokie machines here in our community. The council listened to that in the end. The pokie machines were dismantled and they are no longer operating inside that community. But does this government listen to people? Does this government care about those families who are going to be harmed by this vast array of opportunities to feed some delusory hope that is inspired by an addiction that needs treatment, not an opportunity for people to squander the little they have? So, Mr. Chairman, this government has deliberately made itself deaf and blind to those representations from the people who are to be harmed by this facility and by the people who would represent them, those who know about addictive behaviour, who know what harm it does, who know what is required in order to assist people to break addictions and how very difficult that is. And this government has paid no attention at all to the welfare of people. No attention at all. So don't give us this nonsense about high rollers. Don't give us this nonsense about economic development and economic benefit to the country. This is just stark dealing, which is the kind of thing that the Prime Minister has been adept in the past, in his former career. This is not his right to strike deals that harm the citizens of this country. It is not his right. His responsibility is to defend the people of this country, not to expose them to harm, not to disregard any procedures or monitoring that might assess harm in the future. He has abrogated his responsibility because he prides himself as a deal maker. Well, a deal maker might be fine in the corporate sector. That is not how to run a country. It might be how to run a company, but it is not how to run a country. And time again, that accusation can be sheeted home to this Prime Minister. The dealing, the shonky dealing, the behind doors, the talk to your mates only kind of dealing that the Prime Minister is used to is not what the citizens of this country require or expect from their Prime Minister.
Materia to...
Sorry. Thank you, Mr.